Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Board of Education's business meeting for March 5th, 2013. We have a quorum of members present, so we will call the meeting to order. I'd like to introduce or welcome to the microphone Adam Metz, 5th grade student at Boonesboro Elementary, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Adam, when you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Adam, you want to tell us who you brought with you?
These are my parents, Jeff and Laurie Metz.
Thank you, Jeff and Lori, for bringing them. Adam, what else can you tell us about yourself? What class are you in? What do you like to do when you're not leading the Pledge of Allegiance?
I'm in Miss Puffenberger's 5th grade magnet class at Boonesboro Elementary. I like to fish and hunt, basically anything outdoors.
And you're a scout?
Yes.
How long have you been a scout?
24 hours.
Oh, very good.
I've been a Boy Scout 24 hours anyway, but I've been a Cub Scout for 5 years, so.
That's great.
Congratulations.
Well, welcome and thank you for coming here to help us start the meeting. We appreciate it. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Are there any comments, questions, or amendments? Seeing none, the questions on the approval of the agenda. All in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0 and the student concurs. The approval of minutes.
Mr. President, I would like to move for the adoption of minutes from a work session held on Tuesday, February the 19th, a closed session meeting the same date, and a business meeting on February 19th, 2013. Move for adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Are there any comments, questions, or amendments to the minutes? Seeing none, the questions on the approval of minutes. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries 7-0 and the student concurs. Next on the agenda is public comment. There is not anybody who has signed up to speak. Is there anybody who's here who'd like the opportunity to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. First under new business is group health insurance, medical, prescription, dental, including care management and wellness. Mr. Sal?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Mr. Superintendent, members of the board. I have with me Mr. Steve Dillman from CBIZ, our benefits consultants. As you know, CBIZ plays an integral part in assisting us with the preparation and placing of an RFP, and then the analysis of the responses once they come back. This is a process that started probably in the fall around Thanksgiving time. The RFPs went out. The bids were received in January, and after an extensive, very extensive evaluation period, we narrowed down to some finalists. The finalists were interviewed, and we do have for you today a recommendation for health care. For medical, we are recommending continuation of the board's arrangement with Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield. They will be providing the 3-tier plan that the board currently utilizes with a PPO, a point of service, which requires the establishment of a primary care physician and referrals for specialist care and an EPO or HMO product. With regard to the dental, we're again recommending that the board continue with the current dental plan, which is provided by UCCI United Concordia, and for the prescription drug, we're recommending that the board continue its relationship with ESI Express Scripts. That being said, this recommendation has been vetted through the combined HR Finance Committee, and it has also been discussed with the Healthcare Committee, both of whom recommend this recommendation to the board. The recommendation for the health and the medical and the prescription drug would be for a 2-year period with the vendors that we have just named. And that was a recommendation of the joint HR Finance Committee. The recommendation for the dental would be a 4-year guarantee. If there's any questions, well, we certainly would be glad to answer them at this time.
Thank you, Mr. South. Is there a motion to approve the medical, prescription drug, and dental plans?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Questions and comments? Mrs. Brightman?
A few here, and I was unable to attend the joint meeting, so I am sorry if I'm repeating some of my questions that my colleagues may already know the answer, but help me understand. I know that we're staying with incumbent providers right now, but has the network coverage changed? I know a large number of our employees don't live in Maryland. They live in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Do they feel that they're receiving their first or at least second choice on doctors and coverage in this area?
Are
in
you
their
speaking
states?
now of medical, Mrs. Wright?
Yes.
Yes, the network, we still continue to use the Blue Cross network, and of course they do have the out-of-area coverage through other Blue Crosses across the country. So that does seem to be a good fit for our employees that do live out of state.
As well as our retirees that maybe, I assume the
Yes.
coverage seems to be sufficient to
Yes.
give them the service they feel they need.
Coverage, network options has not been an issue with
We haven't heard complaints from.
Correct. No
Okay.
complaints.
On the Express Script, with the Postal Service moving away from Saturday deliveries, do we see any problem with a gap in drug availability or prescription availability with that?
I have not seen it in writing, but one thing I did hear on a newscast was that one of the things that the Postal Service, one of the few things that the Postal Service will be delivering on Saturdays is medications.
So that would be
That
exempt from
should not
this?
be
Not an
impacted.
issue.
Okay. Does Express Script, and this is just a curiosity question, are they able to negotiate drug prices, or do we have any other than the savings of generics and delivering rather than going to a pharmacy? Are they able as a group to negotiate lower prices?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons. Express Scripts is one of the strongest vendors in this market space, and they're one of the largest. Well, with the largest volume of patients, they can drive the largest discount. So that's one of the reasons why Express Scripts was able to hold on, was the value of their discounts.
Okay, and one last question on the Express Script. I understand at one point there might have been some security issues with neighbors maybe picking up over someone else's prescriptions out of their mailbox or something. Have we been able to address Does Express Script have any ideas as to how to be more secure about the drugs that are delivered?
Yeah, we have not, unless Gina would, we have not heard any recently of any issues around home delivery and security of those.
We did have one issue, but I think it was more, it revolved around Schedule II drugs, and the DEA is working that with Express Scripts. It's been several months ago now, so the exact details of it escape me, but it revolved around a neighbor who had somehow gotten access to their neighbor's ID numbers and card numbers and so forth, and had actually ordered scheduled drugs and was intercepting them in the mail.
Exactly.
But that was actually discovered by Express Scripts, and they brought the DEA and
So
got the DEA involved in it. So they've got a fraud unit that stays on top of that sort of thing almost constantly, and they can pick up one on those. I'm sure they've got certain patterns that they look for.
Perfect.
And they can pick up on that very quickly and very quickly pounce on that and bring those folks to justice.
Okay, one final. When I look at the admin fee, the medical, and the stop loss, could you break out that amount? What is the admin fee that we pay Care First? And is there additional in-house administrative fees that the school system, that we incur?
All right. I just want to make sure I understand the question. So you're just looking for a breakdown of the administrative fee?
Of just, yeah, the breakout, is it 1%, 2%? I'm seeing a total there that includes a stop loss.
Correct.
And I'm not sure what portion belongs to which category.
I'm not sure.
Don't have that information right now, but we can get that for you. I apologize.
Is there an additional in-house administrative fee?
In-house, you mean?
Well, we're self-insured, I understand that,
Sure.
but this is a administrative fee that the health insurance provider, the medical, charges us,
That's correct.
okay? And I assume there's additional cost to have this service in-house to us administratively?
Just, are you
I guess
referring to
indirect
the
costs.
folks, just indirect costs? of
We're just
folks?
talking employees, the general
Employee-
overhead. We
general-
don't have it divided up. A specific person is in charge of tracking health care in our organization.
That's a shared responsibility over the 3 individuals in our benefits department.
Okay.
But we don't have that broken out by individual, no.
Okay. Do you know what the industry administrative fee might be for this?
Well, if we're talking at just the administrative fees, generally you're looking at probably something in the range of, for a client of your size, probably something in the 8 to 12% range of total cost would be going towards administration. And that number will vary based on the size of the client and so on. But the vast majority of the dollars that the school board spends is directly on actual medical claims of your employees and their families.
So 10 to 12%? Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, I believe it's a little less than that. It's probably in a range of 7 to 8%.
Are there other, Mrs. Harshman? I'm sorry. Are you finished, Mrs.?
Yes, I
Harshman?
am, thank you.
I know that Cigna had a wellness component to their bid, and I was wondering how Care First compares with that. There are some preventative medicines that I know don't always get covered by Care First, and I was wondering how they compared with Cigna.
I think based on our evaluation, we would, that Cigna is probably one of the leaders when it comes to wellness type programs. Now, if we talk about all the different vendors that are out there, all the different insurance carriers, I think the general position of the marketplace is that's where everyone is headed, is to doing more and more wellness programs, trying to hold employees accountable for healthcare choices they make and so on. I would contend that Cigna is one of the leaders in that. I think Care First has got some good programs as well. So I think they're, are they at the same level? I think that every different vendor, depending on the client, depending on the plan design and so on, it will vary.
Did we request anything in negotiations with them to provide the some kind of wellness programs? And I think one that was brought to my attention was the shingles vaccine. They didn't know if they didn't think they covered that, and some people were interested in having that.
That would be something
Yeah.
That would be, if we wanted to offer the shingles vaccine, that would be an addition to our plan that we would make, and whoever then would be administering our plan would administer that accordingly. So if that's something that the board is interested in offering, that's something that they could offer regardless of who our provider was. The provider is simply administering the plan that we lay in front of them.
Okay.
We say, this is our plan, this is what, that would be very similar to, if you recall several years ago when the board added air ambulance. It was not something that the administrator of the plan had control over. That was something that the board had control over. And the board said, at this time, we believe that it's in our employees' best interest to offer air ambulance. Shingles vaccine would be would be a similar type situation. It would be something that, if you felt that in the interest of your employees, it was something that you wanted to do and you wanted to take on that additional expense, because the majority of it would be the cost of the claim, the roughly $200 or $225 that it costs to get that vaccine. That's something that the board that would be a board decision, and not a vendor decision.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Bailey?
Mr. South, the stopgap measure in the insurance, when a bill reaches a certain point, when does our insurance stop and the stopgap insurance apply?
We have a $300,000 specific stop loss. So when any individual claim reaches $300,000, the stop loss takes over.
And that, to clarify, that is for all expenses related to that individual. So it's not just per condition, let's say. It would be for all the claims for that person in a given year.
Okay, I was just interested in that dollar figure. And is there a product, an insurance product, whereby a person with an extended illness, and we have had them, our teachers, our staff, and so forth, that beyond the number of days that they had accrued for illnesses, or what kind of a product is there out there to take care of those people who have reached the end of everything?
Are you, when you say days now, are you referring to sick days, Mr. Bailey?
I'm referring to sick days when they've used them all up, and
we obviously have the sick leave bank,
yes,
which is available.
okay, and you've
so you're assuming that's been.
And I'm assuming and we've had employees use that, and then they're grasping at straws as to what they can do next. Is there anything on the market that provides for that?
So you're speaking more of a salary continuation.
Or like a long-term disability.
A long-term disability, I guess it would be.
Or there's private market things like.
We do have an LTD plan.
Yes.
That is salary continuation. And that's a product that we don't have that tied to our medical and dental and that sort of thing at this time. But if you'll recall, about a year ago, we did go to market for life LTD and AD&D. So, yes, that is available to our employees.
So but you're correct. There is a gap in there at the end of a their sick bank.
Yes.
Till long-term disability kicks in. And there are products out there, short-term disability products, that folks can buy on an individual basis and on a voluntary basis.
That's a good piece of information. Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? I just want to confirm these particular bids did go through the healthcare committee that includes employee
Yes, there's
input and participation. And
There are representatives of all three employee groups on the healthcare, employee healthcare committee. This was presented to them. They were in concurrence with the recommendation, and that actually went to the healthcare committee. I think it was on Tuesday before it went to the joint committee, joint HR Finance Committee on Thursday.
Great, thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, the question is on Mr. Ridenhour's motion to approve the medical, prescription, and dental care management and wellness programs. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries 7-0 with the student concurring. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very
Sell.
much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the consideration of appointments to a board advisory committee. Mr. Criswell.
Dr. Wilcox,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Hart.
Just want to remind the board that there'll be two portions of this motion. The original motion, which is to approve a number of members, and a secondary motion, which has been distributed to the board members, to consider the continuation till the initial work of the charge has been delivered. So we'd have some carryover members. Mr. Criswell?
Thank you. That's exactly correct. I'm here today seeking approval of two separate motions, as Dr. Wilcox stated. The first is for the approval of the committee member appointments to the Facility Enrollment and Advisory Committee, as previously discussed. The second motion is that we are requesting the approval of the Board of Education that Bert Eisminger, Lorraine O'Connor, and Kira Hammond, who are currently serving as members on the Facility Enrollment and Advisory Committee, continue to serve on the committee until May 15th, 2013.
Is there a motion to approve the new members to the Facilities Committee?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, the question is on the approval of the new members. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. The student concurs with one abstention. Is there a motion to approve the three individuals to continue on the committee until May 15th?
Mr. President, I move to approve that Bert Eisminger, Lorraine O'Connor, and Kara Hammond, who are currently serving as members of the Facility and Enrollment Advisory Committee, continue to serve as members of the committee until May 15th of 2013.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the question is on Mrs. Brightman's motion for the three individuals to continue until May 15th. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries 7-0 and the student concurs. Thank you, Mr. Criswell. Next on the agenda is the consideration of the Geographic Information System Planning Software.
Good afternoon, Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, and members of the board. Worked with the Facilities Department to solicit and receive proposals for the purchase of a piece of software, licenses to go with it, and installation and support services for a new geographic information system for the Facilities Department. We did receive 3 proposals, and we also considered a 4th proposal that had been submitted to us separately by a 4th company. Those proposals were reviewed and evaluated by members of the Facilities Planning, IT, and Purchasing Departments, and it did include a representative from Washington County on that review committee. And those committee members ranked the 4 proposals and selected the 2 top proposals, and then sat through a 1-hour teleconference demonstration of the features of the different software products. The software that's being recommended is Davis Demographics and Planning. The committee felt that it achieved the maximum functionality in terms of boundary planning, student forecasting, demographics analysis, and reporting. It works with the latest mapping software technology that's been adopted by the county, and it was the only software package that has a direct or extension to the ArcGIS mapping environment, as opposed to the other companies which offer a sort of an extract from the mapping system and then convert it into their own software to, so there's some delay there, I guess, in processing speed that we would experience. The committee recommends award of the contract at a total cost of $63,616, including the software and maintenance of the system for 4 years after it's implemented. Chad and I are here to answer any questions that you might have about this procurement.
Thank you, Mrs. Freeman. Is there a motion to approve bid 2013-29?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Are there any questions or comments? Mrs. Williams?
Yes. Can you tell me, are there any other systems in Maryland using this particular software?
Yes, ma'am. I can't remember the exact county. When we checked into Davis, I know I had checked around with Frederick County and a couple of the other similar-sized counties. And I know there's one. I just can't remember the county's name though offhand. But yes, ma'am, they are utilized in Maryland. I think they had it listed.
They're in 31 states.
31 states and perhaps one other county in our state?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then may I have a follow-up question, Mr. President?
You can take as long as you need, Mrs.
Okay.
Williams.
The cost of the actual software, it looks to me, in what I've been given, there's cost included for training and implementation and also for the maintenance agreement. I'm wondering what the actual software itself costs. I've done the math, and I just want to make sure that I'm...
No, I think I brought every piece of paper I have except the spreadsheet on that. No, I do have it here. Hold on a sec. The software itself is not provided broken out that way, at least on the spreadsheet I have.
By license, I believe. I believe they provide the software, the software cost by license, and I believe it's. Sure.
Yeah, the first license is $11,995. The second license is $2,595.
Okay. And so we're going to be paying a yearly maintenance agreement for 4 years at $3,350, and then thereafter, we continue with an agreement. Do we know what that might look like?
No, ma'am.
No.
We would have to renegotiate or rediscuss the continuation of it at that point in time.
But that price is good for each
That's
of the
correct.
4 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any other, Mrs. Fisher?
I believe the existing mapping software that we have was purchased in 2005 or 2006 during my first tenure on the board. What will this software do for us that the original software doesn't?
This software has some additional planning capabilities. Actually, the original software, we contacted them to see what they would be interested in soliciting for this bid, and they were interested in submitting a proposal, but after reading it, they declined to submit a proposal. This will allow us to go in and do some additional planning functions, such as we'll be able to move boundary lines a little easier. We'll be able to go in and look at pupil generation rates within the ArcGIS system. It'll actually tie in very well with the new EduPoint student system that we just are currently installing. As far as some of the added benefits, one of the key components, as Mrs. Freeman mentioned, is that it is truly an extension of the Esri ArcInfo software. So it will be completely compatible with the system we have and the system of the county, so information can be sent back and forth very easily.
Well, thank you.
Are there any other questions, Ms. Burton?
A couple. Looking at this software program, do you see this as aligning itself well with Public Pathways, another vendor that we use to help us with redistricting? Do you see it as maybe a redundancy? Do you see any possibility to capture some savings with that vendor?
I think it's certainly something that we could look at and explore as we see how the numbers come in and how this generates, actually generates the information and how they play out with the upcoming enrollments. So I think there is definitely a possibility there. I think we just want to review it and make certain, kind of tap our feet in the water before we just jump in right away.
Do you know when the Public Pathway contract is up for renewal?
Believe that is an annual contract. I believe she's set to present to the board in April. She's coming in to do the latest projections, so it would be after this year, it would be up again if we wanted to consider it ahead of time.
Okay. What do you think software's programs seem to last a very short time, and somebody comes up with a better program? Do you have any idea how 30 other states are using this software? Do you have any idea as to how long we can expect this to be relevant?
One of the benefits of this system is they are up to date with the most current ArcInfo GIS. They're actually one step ahead of what the county and what WCPS has currently as our ArcGIS license. So because they're a sister company, that's problems taken care of, and they continually add additional planning functions to their software. That was one of the key selling points that the committee talked about, was it would always be current with our current GIS mapping system that both the school system and the county utilize.
So not only the information, but the functionality of it?
Yes, ma'am.
When would this be up to speed?
What was that, 100 and...
I think that the way the RFP was structured, the intention was to have the implementation completed before July.
I believe it was around 120 days is what we had solicited in the bid. Now, that is subject to, we could slow that down if we run into any type of issues or we come up with a reason to slow it down, but we went with 120 days.
Okay. So it won't be available for the charge that we have before?
Not for the charge due
on the Pangborn?
That's correct, but it will certainly be up and running
For West City?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the question is on Mrs. Brightman's motion to approve bid 2013-29. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries 7-0, and this student concurs. Next is a consent agenda regarding bids 2013-01 and 2013-22. Mrs. Freeman.
Yes, we have two bids this afternoon for your consideration. The first is a boiler and chiller replacement at Fountaindale Elementary School. This contract will replace the existing boiler, chiller, and associated piping, as well as update the electrical connections in the building. It is significantly funded by the state in part, so as such, prevailing wage rates and minority business enterprise procedures apply to the bidding as well as the procurements after the contracts are executed. It is a lump sum complete contract amount where the vendor furnishes all labor, materials, equipment, and any miscellaneous things that might be needed for the project. Phase 1 will begin in April with substantial completion by October 15th. Phase 2 is the on-site work, which needs to start in June once summer break starts, and substantial completion of that second scope of work is by August 19th. The Procurement Review Committee looked at the recommendation and concurs that M&M Welding and Fabricators of Gaithersburg, Maryland, submitted the lowest responsive and responsible bid at $758,000. And as such, we are recommending that the board accept that bid proposal and move forward with this work. Second bid, ceiling and lighting at McKay Dowb. We had 8 companies participate. There's a work involving removing of existing ceiling and lights, reinstalling ceiling-mounted accessories such as speakers, fire alarms, devices, projectors, and cameras, removal and replacement of the ceiling grid, acoustic ceiling tile panels, and some gypsum board bulkheads, repairing and repainting those, and some adjacent architectural improvements. Electrical work is also obviously going to be a part of this work with the removal and replacement of the existing lights and other related devices. The field work, as I said, would start on June 3rd, and substantial completion of this project in entirety is to be accomplished by August 9th. Procurement Review Committee recommends the award to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Callis Contractors of Hagerstown, at a total cost of $157,975. Callis has done some other ceiling and lighting projects for the school system before over the last several years. So we're very familiar with their capabilities and comfortable with the recommendation.
Thank you, Mrs. Freeman. Is there a motion to award bid 2013-01 to M&M Welding and bid 2013-22 to Callis Contractors?
Mr. President, I move for approval of the bid for the boiler and chiller replacement at Fountaindale Elementary School and the ceiling and lighting replacement at McKay Dowb Elementary School.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Mrs. Williams?
You spoke to Callis Contractors as being a group that we've used in the past. Forgive me if I missed you saying something about M&M Welding. Is this a company that has done work for us in the past?
No.
No.
They have considerable experience, though,
Okay.
and they've done a lot of boiler replacement projects as a subcontractor throughout the state of Maryland under Johnson Controls.
Okay.
So they're very
So-
they're very capable.
So you're
as
familiar with them in that way through our work with Johnson Controls?
well. Mostly through having pre-qualified them. They've submitted references and all of their work history, and I reviewed that.
We have staff in the maintenance department who worked with them at other jobs.
Okay, so Ms. Freeman,
So-
you're as comfortable recommending M&M Welding as you are with Callis Contractors?
Yes, they've been in business 39 years.
Okay, that's all I need to
Did
hear.
make a
Thank
few
you.
notes about them.
Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? Mr. Bailey?
Mr. Rollins, some of the funding for the boiler and chiller will come from QZAB funds.
Yes.
Explain just briefly QZAB.
QZAB is a federal program that provides money for usually aging school projects. Also, to qualify for QZAB funding, you have to have a free and reduced meal rate of over 35%. So it targets money towards schools that may be in less fortunate areas. The school qualified. It also requires that schools participate in matching 10% of the funds that are appropriated by the QZAB program. In this case, the school will be doing it through volunteer hours that it will be kept track of, and the school is signed on to do that, and they have a strong PTA, and I think there'll be no problem with them meeting their goals. I think they have 15 years to get the volunteer hours needed for every project to match 10%. So.
That's a very thorough explanation, and I appreciate it. We've had numerous other schools take advantage of that by their volunteer service.
Right.
They get credit for that, for the volunteering. Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the question is on Mrs. Fisher's motion to approve the two bids. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion carries 7-0, and the student concurs. Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Next on the agenda is the consideration of a gift to Williamsport High School. Mr. Akers.
Good afternoon, President Hardings, members of the board, Dr. Wilcox. I'm here on behalf of Williamsport High School to request that you accept the donation of industrial equipment at the value of $20,000 for Williamsport High School for use in their manufacturing and pre-engineering program.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Is there a motion to approve the gift from Volvo Powertrain North America?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Questions or comments? Could you give us any more detail as to exactly what this is? That's, I mean, it's a very large gift, very, very generous, and it's probably worth certainly us and the public probably knowing what opportunities this will make available to kids that they might not have now.
As an English teacher and not an engineer, I thought you might ask that, so I actually brought something I could read to you. The machine itself is a Micro VU Excel 4520 automated imaging system. So to explain, the AIS is an optical coordinate measuring machine and is used to analyze products for tolerance, accuracy, and precision. So it's more or less a manufacturing testing piece of equipment. So after something is manufactured and you want to test it to make sure that it meets the specifications it was built for, you would use this machine to do that. And that's probably as good as I'm going to be able to do in explaining that.
You did very well, English teacher or no. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, the question is on Mr. Ridenhour's motion to approve the gift. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries 7-0 and the student concurs. Thank you, Mr. Akers.
Thank you. I might add just two quick things. And Mr. Akers, you certainly are free to sit or free to go, but this comes about as a result of a deepening partnership with Volvo. And in fact, just last week, Volvo announced they are going to sponsor a district-wide robotics competition for our young people. We'll be having students from our high schools and our middle schools participate in a nationally recognized competition. Volvo is going to underwrite the initial costs for not only the kits, but they're going to provide some of the mentors. This is just another small step in a great and deepening partnership with Volvo Powertrain here. So thank you, Mr. Akers.
Very exciting.
One additional note, just as we purchased the GIS software, that small county that we forgot was Montgomery County.
Oh, small one.
Little county to the west of us, I guess, or east of us. East.
Next on the agenda is consideration of the draft FY 2014 General Fund operating budget. Mr. South. You're a busy guy with us today, Mr. South.
And you've already used up most of your time allocation, so just kidding.
I'll defer to you, Mr. Chairman.
No, this is all you.
On February 5th, the superintendent and his staff publicly presented the superintendent's recommended fiscal year 2014 general fund budget. In the interest of time, I'm not going to review that presentation again this afternoon. However, since February 5th, board members have had the opportunity to individually review the recommended budget to ensure that it will provide the students of Washington County with the very best education possible, and to formulate any additions, deletions, or changes that they believe need to be made to that document. The budget calendar that the board approved requires that the board will adopt a draft budget this afternoon that will be taken to public hearing next Tuesday, March the 12th. At that time, the board is also scheduled to hear a recommendation from their Budget Advocacy and Review Committee regarding the fiscal year 2014 draft budget. The following Tuesday, March the 19th, the calendar calls for the board to make any changes that it deems necessary from the information that it will glean from that public hearing and that Budget Advocacy and Review Committee presentation, and at that time adopt its proposed fiscal year 2014 budget. Then on March 28th, the board will present that proposed budget to the Board of County Commissioners for approval. Given this extremely tight time schedule, staff recommends that the board adopt the superintendent's recommended fiscal year 2014 budget, along with any changes that it deems necessary as its draft fiscal year 2014 general fund budget.
Thank you, Mr. South. Is there a motion to adopt the draft FY 2014 budget as the board's draft budget?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Questions and comments on the draft budget?
When we see, assuming sequestration survives the next few months, I think education agencies are expected to feel that impact in August. And do we have an idea of what that might mean to us in Washington County?
Yes, we do. We've done some preliminary looking at those documents, and this is the information on sequestration is fluid, to say the least. But we've estimated that our impact in year one, which year one will actually be year two, will be FY14, this coming year, will be anywhere between 664,000 and 1.6 million. Now, I know that's a big swing, and that big swing it relates to the implementation dates and when things will actually hit our budget. The $1.6 million assumes worst case scenario, and that would be if everything hit our budget in fiscal year 14, which it appears at this time that that's the way it's going to come down, is that there will be some impact from 13, but it will be actually, the impact will actually be postponed until 14. So you'll feel your impact from 13 and 14 in fiscal year 14. And if that's the case, that number could be as high as $1.6 million. Now, I say as high as, that's worst case scenario, because we're hearing everything from 9.2% all the way down to what the press is saying, and that is that defense is going to be about 7.7% and everything else is going to be 5%. So that's why there's such a wide swing. We haven't gotten any kind of firm numbers from MSDE at this point, but we believe our worst case scenario for FY14 is $1.6 million, and we're working to develop plans as to how we'll deal with that.
Okay, thank you. If you look on page 2 of 40, I'm going to just ask a couple questions about two items. One is the school library program. I know I sort of became the poster child for textbooks and sort of not wanting to buy textbooks for a while, and now I'm going to sort of talk about libraries in the same context of technology. Correct me if I'm wrong, is there a state or federal program that mandates that we spend a certain amount of money each year on library materials? Am I making that up, or am I remembering that correctly?
And
I think there's...
I'll give you my understanding of it,
Okay.
and then someone from instruction may correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that there are standards to which we are to aspire of so many
Volumes per child.
volumes per student, yes. Be that whether it's electronic or whether it's print
Does it
volumes
actually
or whatever.
state electronic versus
I believe there is electronic.
I think it's just volumes. I don't
Is
think
it
it
just
ma-
hard
I don't
volumes?
think
I apologize.
they've gone. I guess where I'm going here is I'm looking at a cost of hold on, $3.2 million.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we see any chance, and maybe this is a question for the superintendent, of changing the makeup of our libraries to be more reflective of technology to the point where there may be an opportunity for savings there?
Well, I would say this, I think there is an ongoing change in the nature of collections taking place right now, kind of naturally, but I would want to defer to Jonna French, who is our Director of Library Services, and perhaps we could bring them to a workshop and talk about not only where the board would like to see us go, but where they are naturally heading. I think that would be a great discussion.
I think there's a large amount there that we could at least have that
You know,
conversation about.
I think one of the things that we're finding, particularly when you get to, certain works of nonfiction or fiction, is the publishers have figured out that whether they give it to you electronically or in print, they're not going to lose money. So you don't see a lot of difference right now in some of the costs, but again, maybe we can have that conversation as well.
Go ahead.
One other, if we're still on that same page, and again, one of my issues that I kind of keep beating up on from time to time is special ed programs. So we're looking at, I don't see a line item, but it's on that same page 2 of 40 under unrestricted expenditures. It's about the 10th line down under instructional programs, special ed programs, and non-public or private contracted centers. Are you with me?
Yes.
ma'am.
Okay.
$2.7 million.
And I know it's easy to make numbers do whatever you want if you just add the right ones together or whatever, but I just went back and sort of tracked the budget for non-public placement versus in-house services for our special ed. And from year 05 to 2014 projected budget that we're looking at, we're looking at an increase over that period of time of $5.9 million, or basically about a 36% increase. And I know that we can say, well, we're handling more children, possibly who have been identified as special ed, but, and I couldn't find this when I was looking for it, but what I think our special ed numbers seem to be flattening, our enrollment numbers, or possibly declining a little bit. So I guess I'm looking at that, and then when I compare the non-public placement over that same period, it's only been a decrease in our expense to them of a little over 1.1 million. So, I'm looking at a net cost to the school system of close to 5 million, and I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers out at you right now, but the general concept is I've always wondered if we were, one, truly saving money when we went to the Summit program. And when I look at these numbers very superficially, and probably not having all the answers obviously in front of me, I see that it's cost this system a fairly significant increase to deliver those services. And I'm not talking about quality of services, I'm just talking strictly numbers right now.
And certainly quality of services is a big issue there.
I get that.
I would just point out, and we certainly can delve into this more if the board would like to have some additional information on this, but the special ed programs in Washington County Public Schools, that's where the majority of your salaries are for all your special ed teachers. So a lot of what you're seeing there is the salary increases over that roughly 10-year period.
Because I noticed we added a lot of social workers, we added a lot of instruction when we took over a larger number of those students in-house.
And again, there was some increase, as you're absolutely correct, there were some increases in personnel in there with the advent of the Summit program. Now, the reason for the decrease, obviously, in the private contracted centers, the next line down,
but you'd hope it would be a wash or close to a wash in a way, and it seems to be.
Right, and I believe if you look specifically at that program, you'll see that there's actually about $1 million savings in there, if I recall from the analysis that we did. But again, when you put those additional folks in there, and then you factor in the salary increases over 10 years, that's why you're seeing the significant increase in that first line, the special ed programs in Washington County Public Schools.
It just seemed, when I did a comparison over about 12 years or 8 years, it seemed to be trending in a direction that I was surprised by. So,
I think nationally, what we're seeing is a tremendous increase in the expense to the general fund for special education. I think that's partly as a result of the intensity and the severity of the kids that you're seeing, which results in a higher labor cost, because what you have are kids who prior to, say, 15, 20 years ago weren't in school at all, are now in school and they have to have a pupil-teacher ratio of 4 to 1, meaning 4 students for each one, or there might be a 1-to-1 relationship with a paraprofessional with them. What I think our special education director would say to Mr. Gladhill is that the numbers are probably going to continue to increase as the severity and the intensity of the needs come. Many of our kids, say 5, 10 years ago, were served in resource rooms or a resource setting. Today, many of our special needs children are in a 1-to-1 relationship at school. So the fundamental nature of special education is changing. That's why you see a 36% cost increase. It's in the number of people and then the pay that we have to pay. Because we're also now, when you look at, say, the services that we get from Brooklyn or others, we're getting fairly high-end psychiatric help for some of these kids. And those people with those advanced degrees, have a fairly high per diem rate.
all right, it just, again, one of those issues that continues to,
Us as well.
I struggle with, so thank you.
Ms. Fisher?
My comment won't affect directly the budget in any way, but based on Ms. Brightman's comment about the libraries, I wanted to kind of get this on the record before I forget about it. As a former English teacher, this is where it's coming from. It's one thing to use an e-book or a computer to read a novel or a short story versus nonfiction. And there is a very strong emphasis with Race to the Top on, in all disciplines, students reading more nonfiction and using it for resources, research, and so on. And I would, if it comes to it, argue that we can't switch everything over, even though I know there isn't much difference in cost to computers, because I think when you're doing research, there's a lot to say for being able to have a book that you can switch back and forth from page to page quickly and find the information you need than there is to go back and forth between various websites and so on to find that information. So if it comes down to it, I'm going to get in a fight over this.
Well, when you look at the changes required by the Common Core, one of the things that you're going to see is that historically, I think libraries have had 70% of their collections being fiction and only about 30% being nonfiction. That ratio is actually being flipped on its ear. It's almost going to be reversed. 70% of our collection will have to be nonfiction, 30% fiction. So I think that's another reason to sustain library spending, but at the same time, I think it is still important to continue to look at what is the appropriate mix between those kind of resources that you talk about and the fact that just holding a resource book in your hand. I think that's very important. It's a point not lost on us, and I know there are probably librarians all across this district right now who are jumping up and down for joy that somebody recognizes the value of the printed word on a page that you can turn, not on an iPad.
And I would add too, 90-some% of the cost on that school library programs page is in salaries. So we're talking about the librarians who are in our schools. And maybe what we're really talking about in this conversation is a question that I'm sure the librarian community's been working through for years and years and years. But what are the skills that those library media specialists should be working with our students on to be prepared for the modern workplace and the modern world? Yes, Mrs. Williams.
I have a question. Page 23 of 40, student health programs. Items, I guess I'm looking at 10 and 12. There's office supplies, $15,000, and then $30,000 for other supplies and materials. Could you provide some examples of what those, we have medical supplies listed. I'm just wondering what other supplies and materials might be. And I'm asking this, and that's a 300%, oh, sorry, 3,000% increase. I missed a zero there.
These are charges that we picked up when we picked up the nursing program from the health department. These were supplies and office supplies and other supplies and materials that the health department heretofore paid for. And that's why there's such a large increase in that, because that was part of what the health department brought to the health suites when they came. The other supplies and materials, Mike, do you know what's in there? In that other supplies?
I was thinking it was AEDs, the new AEDs for all the elementary and middle schools.
That may well
What
be.
are they?
It may have very possibly some of the AED materials, automatic external defibrillators that we're putting into the system.
I think we
Under
paid for
supplies
the-
and materials, that would not be
I
equipment?
think we
That
paid
would-
for the defibrillator
Medical.
machines out of security equipment. I think the other supplies and materials are just things that are in the health rooms that might not necessarily be medication or,
Scales.
yeah, stuff that's not strictly defined as medical
But
supplies.
wouldn't those things
that-
already be existing? I guess what I'm questioning is when we
Somewhere.
have 17 FTEs and we've got $15,000 worth of office supplies for those 17 people and
The-
then $30,000 in other
The
supplies and
supplies that we're
materials.
talking about here are not necessarily for the FTEs above. They're for the contracted nursing folks. That
Okay.
Meritus, we contract with Meritus, and those people are in the health rooms, but that we're covering the cost of the supplies in those health rooms.
Okay, so we're talking about more people than 17 that would be
Yes.
using
We're talking about a nurse.
$79,000 worth of supplies.
We're talking
or
about the nursing
75,000.
personnel that are in the health rooms in every school, so at least 46.
Okay,
Plus the supplies, any supplies that those 17 above would use. The 17 above are strictly one-on-ones, where we have students
I
who
see.
have
Thank-
needs that cannot be met just on an intermittent basis.
okay. Thank you
with-
for
with the-
clarifying that.
With the
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Just a brief comment. Budget times are rather tight right now, all budgets, regardless whether it's public or whatever. But I'm pleased to see that we were able to maintain some summer school programs. I guess my only comment in that regard would be post it early, get notification out early so that people can plan for that.
Are there other questions or comments? I'll just comment on two things quickly. Number one, the budgeted amount for healthcare costs for our employees. I see that reflects about a 3% increase over last year. It's good to see that after a couple years where the increases were very large, that we've had a number of years now where we've got a slower rate of growth in the healthcare costs, both for us as well as for our employees. So I think that's very positive. I'm also glad to see that the superintendent and staff are recommending to continue the investment in the upgrade of our software and information technology systems. I think as we discussed last year during the budget, last year was really just the first step of many in order to get our information technology systems up to really where they need to be to serve a 21st century school system. So thanks to the superintendent and the staff for their ongoing commitment to those two things, really. If there are no other questions or comments, the question is on Mr. Ridenour's motion to adopt the draft FY 2014 General Fund operating budget. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries 7-0, and the student concurs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sal. Next is the superintendent's report. Dr. Wilcox.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. What we have today are two items on the superintendent's report. Recently, we had a discussion with the city council about our potential movement of our offices. And during that conversation, new chief Mark Holtzman was not able to join us because he was on duty elsewhere. And today, Chief Holtzman joins us, and he'd like to talk to you about downtown policing, downtown safety. So Chief Holtzman, if you'd please come forward. And first of all, welcome to your new position. It's the first time I've been able to say so publicly. Thank you. I will tell you, as the chief gets ready to speak, we've developed a very good working relationship. The other day, we had a joint tip from the FBI relative to some school security. The chief's first call was to me, which I very much appreciated. He then called me back later in the day to say that things had been correctly resolved, and that comes on top of early on in his tenure, helping us to respond to the shootings in Connecticut and making sure that our community felt safe here in Washington County. So, Chief, again, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilcox, and thank you to the board for giving me a few minutes of your time. Kind of put a face to public safety downtown. I'll be that face today, but I also brought some pictures with you. I think pictures tell a lot. I'd like to just lead off real quickly with saying thank you for bringing the Barbara Ingram School downtown, those of you that were on the board during that time and those that continue to support it. It is just amazing to go downtown, see young faces crossing the street several times a day and just reintroducing an entire new generation to that downtown. Between the Barbara Ingram School and the university, I see future generations just really adopting that. When they drive downtown later on, when they get their driver's license, they'll say, "This is my high school. This is where I went to school." And you have lots and lots of kids that have the opportunity now to say that. So thank you for bringing that downtown. And as I give my presentation here today, which will only just take a couple of minutes, you'll notice I have a particular interest in the downtown. And that interest lies in my wife works down there. And my daughter graduated college down there. So I'm totally committed to the downtown. My wife walks those streets every day, parks downtown on the surface lots, walks a good block to her office every day, and back again in the evening. I do understand that it gets dark about 4:30 in the wintertime, and we've adjusted some of our sources to meet that need. My daughter attending college down in the evening, and she asked me, "Dad, well, how about safety downtown?" I said, "Well, why don't you go down and let me know how you feel and talk to some of the other students that are down there." And getting over the anxiety the very first day, driving down, where do I park, that sort of thing. Just park in the deck, walk out the back, you'll see it's very easy to find. And sure enough, she had a good experience down there, and just an overall good experience. So in getting into public safety downtown, how do we do it downtown? We sort of layer our approach, and we also tailor fit to the business community and the needs of special events that happen to be going on downtown at any particular time. It starts with the downtown squad. We have a dedicated downtown squad, and this started around 2002, beginning of 2003, so that was our first full year. Now, it takes a couple of years when it comes to public safety to grab a hold of something, and if you would flip over on the back, you'll see right around 2005, we begin to trend downward downtown. This is our downtown corridor, and the bright orange ones at the top are property crimes, and down at the bottom, the more gold color ones are violent crime. So you'll see around 05, we begin to trend downward and then stabilize into what we have now is a real good foothold on downtown public safety. That's through our downtown squad. It's not perfect. Everybody has a story, knows somebody that might have had something happen to them, read about it in the paper, and it's not perfect. But this is how we do it, and I think this is the best, the most professional way to do it. Beginning last year, in 2012, we added a new feature, which is the auxiliary police. And many of you have been down there. You've seen the Barbara Ingram School kids crossing the street. And on the front, you'll see this picture in the middle, the auxiliary policeman on the left. He's not a sworn police officer. He's a auxiliary policeman and wears a uniform, carries a police radio, and they add that, what I would call that comfort level downtown that we're looking for. So we started them off around lunchtime, 11 to 1 in the afternoon, or around lunchtime. Folks are leaving their offices, they're going to grab a bite to eat. They want to see an extra policeman or two, or that I would call that public safety presence downtown, which is a term I like to use, public safety presence. Again, in the evening from 4 to 6, I mentioned my wife walking home from work to her car, 4:30, 5 o'clock, starts to get dark. So, and we heard that a lot. So we added, in addition to 1 or 2 policemen that might be working at any one time down there, we add the auxiliary police from 4 to 6 or even 6:30 in the evening, and we can kind of tailor fit that. Now, that's just on a day-to-day basis. A special event happens, they're there. Our downtown squad, police officers adjust their hours, If you went to the Maryland Theater, you probably saw a policeman when you attended that. That is just a regular part of it. You go to Downtown Friday, or Wind Down Fridays, you'll see auxiliary police down there working that event, directing some traffic, helping people cross the street, letting people know where they are. In addition to that, we have our other public safety partners, and I mention this because none of us do this alone. You think about downtown, we have a sheriff's department that works out of the courthouse. They're there, they're walking the streets, they're parking on the streets. Sometimes it's hard to get a parking space for all the police cars parked down there at certain times of the day, especially around court. We have a courthouse over on District Court, right behind the proposed location I know that the council had mentioned to you about. So behind you, you have a courthouse. To the west of you, you have a courthouse. Across the street, the downtown squad. And then in the square, you'll oftentimes see the fire department will have their doors rolled up. And it really is a public safety presence. You know, a few years ago, we started this consolidated 911 center and a radio dispatch that went along with it. We're all on the same radio channel now. A firefighter sees something, he carries the same radio I do, he just calls for a policeman. Hey, I see something across the street I don't like, maybe you go down and check it out. And that happens, and we do that. So we can talk to one another directly. So that's a nice safety level. So having everybody on the same channel. Even the security officer at the University of Maryland downtown, we gave them access into our security camera system downtown, and we would do the same for the Board of Ed. So imagine when you go to leave for the day, you go to walk out to your car. Wouldn't it be nice to see the parking lot? Wouldn't it be nice to see the parking garage where your car's parked? Well, you can do that. Put a TV camera up on the screen. We give you access into the system, and you can take a quick glance and look at the entire parking lot before you even walk out the door. Now, if you don't feel comfortable, that's what the dedicated downtown squad and auxiliary police are for. They have a phone number. You call them directly. Hey, would you mind walking me to the car? A lot of business owners, they cash out at the end of the day. They have all their bank receipts with them, and they're going to the bank to make the deposit. They'll make a quick call directly to the officers that are working. They pick up the phone, sure, I'll be right up. Walk them to the bank and do their bank drop. That happens all the time. You heard this morning that some of you did from the city council presentation. There are 3,000 employees that are working downtown. There are a lot of businesses that are still downtown, a lot of public buildings that are still downtown. So those cash deposits are getting made constantly, and that's how we meet that need. So it really is a tailored approach. It's a layered approach. On the back, I just share with you some of our crime cameras. We're expanding that crime camera system to just kind of fill in some voids that we had. That's already been done. And again, the access to those particular cameras around your property or where you'd be parking, we can make that available to you just like we do for the University of Maryland downtown. And so that's sort of it in a nutshell. I just made that quick. And again, it's not perfect. I'm happy to take any questions now or work with you later on and anything that you have.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions from? Sure.
I was wondering why the police station moved from the downtown location and is now on
On Burhan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was, they grew out of their space, and they got the building for $1. So back in 1978, they moved into the police station on Burhan's Boulevard from the 4th floor of City Hall, and it was just an expansion, and the railroad wanted to give up that property, gifted it to the city for $1, and they went in and renovated it for just a few more dollars, I think, and we moved in. We've been there ever since. But we have reinvested in opening up downtown in our downtown squad. The university gave us a substation down there. We also opened a second substation over on Franklin Street that our auxiliary police use. If you come in the dual highway and you get stopped at that red light at City Hall that everybody gets stopped at, and you look to your left, you'll see an auxiliary police van parked there typically, and there's another downtown substation on that side of the street. So we're really trying to increase our presence downtown in that way. But that's why we moved.
There wasn't anything downtown large enough for you at that time?
In 1978, I don't know. I don't know what was down there. I probably nothing that was up for sale for $1. I'll put it that way.
I think it always gave people a more secure feeling to see more police downtown and to know where they could find them. it seems like there were many more on the streets at the earlier stages, so.
Yeah, years ago, we had the walking officers that would walk down there, and everybody remembers them standing down there. Then they went into police cars, and 10 years ago, we started back with a downtown squad again. They're on bikes, they're on foot, they're in a car, they're moving around. They cover a lot of territory, and that's why we have the auxiliary to kind of add a little bit of visibility for the crossing the street and that sort of thing. We encourage the officers to get inside the businesses and talk to the business owners and see what's going on and how we can help them. But you're absolutely right. The police station did move, and we've tried to build our footprint back down there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Bailey?
Congratulations, Mark, on your promotion.
Thank you.
I take a great deal of pride in recognizing former students. And that seems to always happen at least once every meeting. But again, I congratulate you, and we'll be keeping an eye on your work.
Thank you very
Just
much.
like I did when you were in school.
Yes, you did.
Mr. Ridenhour?
Chief, thank you for coming, and you know, on behalf of this board, I know we appreciate what our police departments do for us. And I also appreciate the fact that you didn't come here and say you should come downtown because everything's peachy keen. You know, what you did do is say there are issues, we're trying to deal with them, and we feel like we're getting better. And I appreciate that because, you know, when we were told a week or so ago, you know, any issues downtown are just perception, that was a little annoying to me because, you know, I have an office right behind University of Maryland on Franklin Street, and we were broken into 2 times in 2 weeks. So that, to me, that's not perception. And to my wife, it's certainly not perception when she's telling me you're not going downtown to work in the evening. So thank you for the approach that you gave us, and thank you for what you and your officers do. You are a credit, they are a credit. And it looks like you're making inroads. You know, maybe that perception will go away after a while, particularly if my building doesn't get broken into for a while. But, you know, thanks again. And thank you for the approach that you had here today, because 33, it's the old...
Oh, I know exactly.
Yeah.
33 West, yeah. And I will tell you, I think it might have been a fault of one of our workers there, but by the same token, somebody's case in the place to know exactly what her movements were in the evenings. And, you know, it's been broken into more than the 2 times, quite a few times. It's just... It's a funny design building, but...
Right. I'm glad you bring up design, and we do. I wrote CPTED down here, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. It's something that we're really involved in, and it's something that you do get with a newer building that you don't get with a retrofit of an older building, and that is you start from the beginning with your design team, designing it with crime prevention involved. So it's crime prevention through environmental design. And we actively get involved in the design of a lot of properties and retrofitting older properties as best as you can. Putting in the basic principles that sort of let people know that you're in charge of this area and removes the places you can hide. Simple rules like the 3-foot, 7-foot rule, which is nothing higher than 3 feet, nothing hanging lower than 7 feet. And then you'll see all the newer buildings have those wrought iron fences. And that's so you can see through them. You can't climb over them. A chain link fence does not work for a police officer in a spotlight. It will not go through a chain link fence. It's just like looking at that block wall. So that's why we ask for these CPTED type of fences to go in. So you're right, design has a lot to do with it, but response to those things, and your burglaries were connected with a couple of others, and there's one particular person involved in that. We've already released his picture to the public,
right.
And we continue to talk about that at our CompStat meetings every 2 weeks. I ask, how are we doing on that? Did we get them yet? So, thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Cradle?
Okay. I'm a young female. I'm a student. If I'm walking downtown
to, say the board moves down there to a board meeting. I have expensive technology with me. I'm alone. It's night. Am I safe? You said you send your daughter downtown to college, but am I safe? This is just walking around downtown at night. When the library was open down there, my mom and I would go down. It wasn't like we just strolled around downtown, like we went from our car to the library and back out to the car. It was not a safe thing.
No, it's a fair question, too. You know, it's common sense. There's a lot of things to do with life and how you approach, how you carry yourself, how you walk. Absolutely. I sent my wife works down there, and I sent my daughter down. She carried her laptop. But she had those same questions you did. And I just said, well, go down and test it out. Park here, go there, and let me know how you feel. And sooner or later, she was just walking across the street to the restaurant, and she felt more and more comfortable about being down there. But it is about that comfort level. The first few times or first time you might come down there, sure, you know, touch base with us. If you're down there and it's late and you're going back to your car, give us a call. We'll have a phone number there for you. You can give us a call. The university security office desk, he can call directly to us and help you walk back and forth. But fair question.
So if the board did move downtown, would you have, when we have public board meetings, would you have officers there?
They would be on duty, and if you wanted them inside the office,
You could call?
you know, we could supply that, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right across the street, so.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? A lot of it is about, I think, what you're comfortable with, and I sort of said this as we met with the council. My neighbor has a long driveway that goes back into the woods, and if you're not comfortable to walking in that kind of an environment at night, knowing that you could run into a raccoon or a skunk or a deer or whatever, it can be frightening. Of course, if you do it all the time, you know, you don't think twice about it. So some of it is what you're used to, and I appreciate your acknowledging that, and that's probably, it sounds like what your daughter was experiencing, is it's just getting used to the environment where she feels comfortable.
Yeah, and my wife's been down there for about 15 years, so.
And I also want to thank you as well for the partnership with our schools, for resource officers, for the other things you do. When we had our report recently on teen pregnancy, one of the things that I said was that society's problems end up in our schools, and there's nothing we can do about that. But often society's solutions can help schools provide solutions as well, and I think our partnership with law enforcement, whether it's the city or the county, is an example of how we bring community resources to do what's right by our kids. So thanks to you and the city for your commitment to that.
You're welcome, and thank you. The school resource officers really do help our day-to-day operations by freeing up a lot of officers that would normally have to handle a call in a school. It really has helped us out, having those school resource officers, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
The next item on the superintendent's report is we're going to begin addressing the long-term sustainability of our facilities. We were approached by a number of folks, but one of the folks who has approached us and would like to share some information today is Mr. Peter Perini. Peter is the president of Perini Landmark Development Corporation. Mr. Perini, welcome, and we're excited to see your concept.
Thank you. Dr. Hardings, members of the board, Dr. Wilcox, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you for a few minutes today regarding the development of a new office building for the Washington County Public Schools Administrative Offices. My name is Peter Perini, and I am president of Perini Landmark Development Corporation, a Hagerstown-based developer. I've been in and around property development for over 30 years in our community. Our family has developed such projects as the IBM building on Dual Highway, the Social Services Building on North Potomac Street, the Magnolia Office Building near the mall, and so on. Also, I have a vested interest in the public school system, having 3 children, 2 of whom have completed 12 years of in Washington County Public Schools and are now in college, and the third completing his junior year at North Hagerstown High School. and they are all doing very well thanks to the education that they have or are receiving from the Washington County Public Schools. I understand the importance of having the best teachers, the best schools, the best administration, and giving the administration the tools they need to do their jobs, from software systems to continuing education to the best work environment possible. So let me start by saying that throughout this process, I have been paying attention. I was here when Dr. Hardings first made the motion to the board to have the superintendent prepare a report on the condition of this building and all of the options to be considered for the administrative offices. I have read this report, including the supplemental information prepared by the Greater Hagerstown Committee on behalf of the City of Hagerstown. I was here to listen to your workshop called to consider the options, and I heard your comments and concerns loud and clear. I was here for each and every discussion, even though sometimes it seems like as if I was the only one in the room besides you and the staff. I was here recently when you met with the mayor and council of Hagerstown, although the room was full for that meeting. I believe I have a good understanding for what you need and what you want. So I am compiling a team for the development of a build-to-suit office building, including developers, an architectural design firm, financiers, and specialty contractors. But let me say this. In 1994, author Jane Cohen Fletcher released a book published by Scholastic Press titled It Takes a Village. And that same philosophy applies here. I welcome the opportunity to talk with others who have good ideas and something of value to bring to this project. We have provided with you today architectural renderings that demonstrate our concept of a new facility, a modern, high-rise, state-of-the-art building with the latest building automation technology. This morning, we saw another conceptual rendering at the State of the City presentation. So I will mention that no one is really tied to one specific building look. However, it is my goal to make a statement with this new building, a statement such as, this is an exciting new addition to Hagerstown and a great new building for Washington County Public Schools. A new building like this will be designed and constructed to meet the exact needs of the Washington County Public Schools without the compromise inherent in a renovation project. Our plan is to construct this multi-use, multi-tenant building in downtown Hagerstown. We will work closely with the city and county officials to make a downtown site not only feasible, but the most attractive option for you. We feel this intergovernmental cooperation, the Board of Education, the City of Hagerstown, and Washington County government, is essential for the success of this project. The city has just this morning pledged to provide parking in a newly constructed parking deck for the use of the Washington County Public Schools. A few minutes ago, the chief presented to you an overview of public safety, and I know that his department works hard to make each person who is downtown not only be safe, but to feel safe. We anticipate a public-private partnership of a traditional landlord-tenant relationship for this project. It would entail private financing and construction as well as private building management. This will give the board the most flexibility while mitigating risk and spreading your cost over a long term. This proposed arrangement will also relieve the board of burdensome capital maintenance costs, which when deferred, as you know, can present significant fiscal and operational issues, not to mention possible health concerns. As a landlord, we will take care of building systems. We will include building automation such as access control for security, access control that's linked to elevator controls, and HVAC controls that are individualized and monitorable. With today's technology, you can check systems and monitor status in real time. Want to make sure that the cooling system is at the optimal temperature in the computer server room? We have an app for that. We agree with the superintendent's statement in his report that a new building could be designed and constructed to exactly meet the Washington County Public Schools needs. We will work closely with the Maintenance and Operations Department, as well as the Facilities Planning and Development Department at the board's and superintendent's direction to ensure the administrative offices meet your needs. We understand that where the administrative offices will be located is the decision of this board and this board alone. We understand that no one is entitled to have the Washington County Public Schools administrative offices. We understand that we must work hard to make our proposal your best option. You have stated your concerns loud and clear, and our team intends to do our very best to make downtown option your location of choice. Our goal is to provide you with a very sustainable, long-term facility to house the Washington County Public Schools administrative offices. So, therefore, I respectfully request the opportunity to meet with the selected Board of Education and the administration to discuss the proprietary details of this project in the very near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Preedy. Board members? President? Questions from Ms. Harshman?
I have a question. You mentioned multi-tenant
Yes, ma'am.
building. What vision do you have for that?
Well, there were two terms, and so let me expand upon that. Multi-use and multi-tenant.
Mhm.
As I mentioned, our proposal is for this building to be in downtown Hagerstown. The very first thought is that any building in downtown, the first floor of that building should be retail. That's kind of the whole point about building in downtown, is to have the traffic flow and the people flowing. So retail on the first floor, that's the mixed use part, retail and office space. The second part is the multi-tenant. So in addition to the retail tenants, we do anticipate having multiple tenants in the building, the Board of Education being one. We are having discussions with other governmental agencies about possibly also being tenants in the building. To be honest with you, I think that that's a better opportunity for the Board of Education, especially in the downtown setting, because if we can provide that opportunity, you're not the only organization in that building. You're not the only organization moving downtown. Our goal would be to try to get multiple organizations or entities, whether they're companies or government agencies, occupying the building at the same time. That answer?
Thank you.
Ms. Brighton?
To be sure I understood your proposal, and I know it's up to be discussed. I'm not saying it's firmed up yet, but you're talking more of a long-term lease rather than a lease-to-own situation?
That's what we would be proposing, yes, ma'am.
And do you have just a basic idea of what a square foot price?
No, ma'am, not today.
Other comments, questions? I'll say there are no buildings that look like that in Hagerstown, and that's an exciting thing. To me, it is. It's an opportunity to do something new and innovative in Hagerstown that would clearly leave a mark in a good way.
I appreciate that comment, because that means you're getting the point that we're trying to make, which is something new and something exciting. I'll just diverse a little bit and say that for the last couple of years, I've been walking around saying, we have some beautiful buildings in downtown. Not only the historic buildings, we have some beautiful new buildings. The back of the University System of Maryland, the back of the Barbara Ingram School, the back of the new library, all beautiful facades that nobody ever sees because they're on the alley. And I'm hoping to accomplish basically taking that concept and turning it around. So when people do ride downtown, and again, BISVA is a beautiful school, well done as far as the renovation. But if you're an outside person driving through downtown, unless you notice that there's kind of a nouveau sign on the front of the building, you may not know that somebody just put $10 or $12 million into that project. It's just another building on the street. Beautiful old building, but it doesn't make the point. It doesn't make the statement that there are things happening in Hagerstown. And that's the point of this kind of design.
The buildings in a city really tell the story of the city. I mean, if you go to New York or Chicago and you see the very, very old buildings in Chicago, the old post office, and up through the boom in the the 70s with the Sears Tower and the Hancock Tower and some of the really new modern, And I see how that would tell the next generation story of Hagerstown. So given all that you're talking about putting in there, it seems like it would be a really large building. What kind of square footage would it have to be? You have some
The rendering
idea?
that you have here, you see here, is a 10-story building. To put that in perspective, that's the same height as the Alexander House building on the square. The footprint of the proposed lot is approximately 40,000 square feet. But if you will, you can see in the second rendering that the tower of the building actually sits back in because it is anticipated to be an all-glass structure. And you can't build a glass wall on the property line. So the footprint of the above the third floor or fourth floor would be slightly smaller. So the size of the building depends on how successful we are with multiple tenants. But if it were a 10-story building, it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 360,000 square feet.
Okay.
Which is
Go
pretty
big or go home, right?
Pretty substantial for downtown Hagerstown.
It is.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, just a curious question, Mr. Prini, and it's a beautiful rendering. When you say 360,000 square feet, I start thinking of financing.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of that building do you think would have to be filled before you get the kind of financing that you would need for a building that size?
That's a good question, and that's kind of what I meant by depending on how successful we are with tenants. I mean, those are drawings on a piece of paper.
Correct.
If
Right,
it
I
turns out
understand
to
that.
be 7 stories, because that's what we were able to accomplish, then obviously it's smaller,
But typically, don't you have to have a certain amount
Yes,
of tendency for finance?
the bare minimum would be 60 to
60%.
65%
Yeah, that's what I
leased
thought. Okay.
prior to development. Again, I'm having conversations also with another agency that's very interested, and they're watching what this board does very closely.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Anything else from anybody?
I did hear Mr. Perini request an opportunity to talk about some of the proprietary elements of his design, his proposal. Would the board like me as the superintendent to have some conversation with him and then meet with the rest of the board or the board president to schedule something?
Sounds good to me.
I think we can perhaps schedule him to come to one of our closed work sessions so long as we're within the 4 corners of the Open Meetings Act and the topics that he would discuss fit within what that law is. I would certainly be open to it.
I'll have the discussion with you, Mr. Perini, and then we'll follow up and have it with legal counsel just to make sure that we can have the conversation within the boundaries of the Open Meetings Act. Okay, and we'll tentatively look towards March 19th, which is our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perini.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Next on the agenda is personnel actions. Mrs. Francisco.
Board. There are several personnel actions today for your review and approval.
Is there a motion to approve the personnel actions?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Radnauer. Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there any comments, any discussion? If not, the question's on the personnel actions. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion carries 7-0, and the student abstains. Thank you.
Very well done.
You said she was going to say, do I need to be here? Next on the agenda is legislative update, Mrs. Cade.
Mr. Trotter.
And Mr. Trotter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I won't be quite as succinct as she was. You've received before the meeting, a write-up of some of the key bills that have been going on in Annapolis, and I'll be touching on those and on a number of others. It's been a strange session. They all are. Each one has its own personality. What has been happening with education bills is that they've been being heard, and many of them are being heard this week, But none of them have really gone to subcommittee consideration. So there's this big backup of discussion that will take place when Ann Kaiser's subcommittee meets, as they are starting to do today after their hearings and so forth. So I can tell you about a lot of bills that are being heard, but the real action on them is going to happen sometime between now and a month from now. It's going to be very lively. It's already lively, as you know, in Annapolis with the big issues that have been going on. We had to move our Green Street meeting from the Senate office building the other day because of the people on both sides that were there relative to the gun bill. And I understand that the hearing on the gun bill in the House went on till after 3 o'clock in the morning. So Mr. Ridenour had to sit and wait for quite a while in a hearing when he was there last week, but nothing like until 3 o'clock in the morning. So may I say, of course, that he did a very fine job on talking about the bill to start the athletic seasons earlier. I'm sorry. And we understand that there is a 3-day reprieve already in the works. It's going to be a very difficult bill to get through because nobody seems to care except Washington County. And some counties are concerned that if one county starts earlier, they'll be pressured to start earlier, and many of them have costly per diems that they would have to pay. Mabe did not testify because the membership is not all in agreement, and none of the counties that oppose it did oral testimony. So we'll see. Again, when it gets to Ann Kaiser's subcommittee is when there'll really be some actual discussion of the bill. I think we are making progress on disparity grants. We are known now very much in Annapolis as the people that talk about disparity grants. And the legislative services people have recommended changes to the disparity grant. They have come up with 3 options. Mr. Serafini, Douglas Serafini had like 8 options, but they actually are suggesting that there be some adjustments, some phase-in, et cetera, et cetera. You were sent my testimony. The real case that I think must be made for disparity grants is the fact that during the economic times, hard times, when the disparity grants were capped and frozen, ostensibly because they were growing fast and because hard times. At the same time, in those same years, the GCEI, which is money that goes to the communities where it's more costly to do education, generally the wealthier counties more central in the state, GCEI was fully funded. So here you have the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. And that's the point I tried to make before the committees. They didn't all like to hear that, but it's true, and it's really an injustice. And I think many of them recognize that that is an injustice. And there's obviously politics at play as well. But I believe that there'll be some relief on disparity grants this year. Another big bill that is before us and going well is the net taxable income. That one is a very good bill for all the counties. Finally, that whole issue of how they determine the wealth of the counties relative to each other is being taken care of, and the governor funded extra money, substantially extra money, to cover that. And I believe that Washington County in the first year of the phase-in will receive more than $600,000 increase because of that change in the net taxable income law. So that one is all good. Everybody likes it. Everybody's happy. It's funded, and it seems to be moving. And the governor is the one that put it in. So there, it's got a lot of blessings. The bill that is really a surprise, kind of, is this thing called the College Readiness and Completion Act of 2013. And this is one I don't think we quite saw coming. I believe it evolved out of Gates Foundation and Southern Educators Education Council, and I'm not sure exactly what group. And its philosophy is fine. Its philosophy is that there should be continuity. Kids who are in our systems should be moving along, should be gotten ready for college. Everybody should try to go to college, community colleges, and the university should have understandings about how many credits can be transferred back and forth, and so there's a lot of right thinking in this, but it's a very it kind of throws into the time frame when you are taking on a whole lot of other changes, demanding certain additional changes. That would be that all students were to be thought of as college prep unless their parents exempt them. That all students take 4 years of math, and so if you finish, even if you finish Algebra 2 in your sophomore year, you would be required to take trigonometry or calculus or something else. But all students would take 4 years of math. In the junior year, they would take readiness exams to see if they were ready to take college courses. And if they were not ready, they didn't handle those courses, and that would be a whole new testing system in your junior year. But then in your senior year, you would take transition courses to get you ready for college.
It'll be fully funded.
Oh, of course. I mean, it's a lot of big stuff happening. Mabe and Pazam have really urged that they put this into a 2-year task force to let people really think it through and see how these changes demanded of public school systems can be brought in along with the other things that are being asked of you at this point. But it looks like the bill might move faster than having a 2-year task force. And so Mabe and Pazam are working to come up with what we think would be the essential amendments to make the bill work. You know, what are the really absurdities in the bill as it's now written? And so that's going to be interesting. And that one is pretty well supported by both the community college folks and the higher ed folks. So it's got wings, wheels, whatever you want to say. It's on the move. The Labor Relations Board, the board itself asked for some amendments that would take out the core principle that we really worked for so hard when the Labor Relations Board was established, that allows that if there is a settlement, but that there isn't enough funding and that the county doesn't give you enough funding to fund that settlement, there would be some renegotiation, but then you would have the final say of how the money was spent. And this would instead kind of completely open renegotiation and take it back through the whole process again. This was really what the finance chairman, that provision was what he felt was keeping it from being true of binding arbitration, and what helped him say okay to the bill 2 years ago. It had not yet been heard on the Senate side, so we don't really know what is going to happen. It was heard on the House, but again, there hasn't been discussion of it by the subcommittee. The collective bargaining representation fee, this would make mandatory in all counties an item of make the representation fees a mandatory item of negotiation. I believe, and I'm not certain, but from the hearing, that you already have that as a permissive matter of negotiation, but it has never been negotiated. You're the only county that's in that little category. Some already have it, some don't have it, you have it halfway, sort of, and then there's another county that has an agreement, but they don't have it in their contract that it can't be negotiated. So that one is very likely to move through the House, and whether or not it will be received as well in the Senate, there seems to be some question. So, but that's a big one, and one that we'll be following very closely. Those are the ones I talked to you about in that nice little memo, but there's a whole lot else, and I'll try and cover it without belaboring. In school construction issues, we talked about Moorheim's bill. There is still the bill that would require that you do an analysis of whether solar energy was an appropriate matter in a new construction, and they have changed it to be major renovations, not just all renovations. The $25 million that's in the budget for school safety facilities in the capital budget, the IAC has approved draft regs, and every jurisdiction would receive, as I understand it, a minimum of $100,000 and potentially a whole lot more. Projects may be aggregated. There would still be requirement for a local match, and the projects would be they could be retroactive to January of this year and through April of next year. Baltimore City School Construction Program we talked about last time I was here, where they would like $30 million commitment from the state on an annual basis to pay, in order to allow them to sell bonds that would allow them to do massive renovation within the next few years. It has a lot of implications. Other school systems might want the same power. Does it affect the bond rating of the state? Is it making commitments that the state really can't make ahead, et cetera, et cetera? So there has been ongoing discussion of this. It is, as I understand it, now instead of creating a new body that would issue those bonds, if this comes to pass, the bonds would be issued by the Stadium Authority, kind of similar to how the housing nonprofit here issued the bonds for the School for the Arts. So we don't know where that one's going yet. There's a bill that I haven't really gotten too familiar with yet, House Bill 503, which could have an effect on fees for stormwater management. It was kind of a sleeper that education people didn't look at right away, and there's a lot of discussion going on about it. So we will be following that to see if that has implications for schools. In school safety, I talked a lot last time about all the different bills that were coming in. I think that what passes is going to be, pretty moderate and not so prescriptive as some of the bills. I mean, there are bills about allowing people to carry guns in school, and there's a lot about having additional mental health services and almost school psychologists and so forth. But the bill that still seems to be clearly supported is the one which would have you as a board do an analysis of the safety of your schools and report on it. And it leaves the responsibility at the local level much more. There's another one that is the Center for School Safety, where there would be training, and the governor has already funded that, and so that is a good thing, and May was supporting that one as well. And one that would say that your schools that you build in the future would all have controlled access, would be designed in certain ways with controlled access, but not saying that right now you have to put a doorbell or this or a mirror or whatever, which was very prescriptive. So trying to get that part of a bill out and maintain the core of the bill is what we're trying to do. And oppose a lot of the bills that are very prescriptive and that may suit certain school systems, but certainly not all. In the area of special ed, one of the really tenacious bills, I guess you would say, is the one calling for the boards of education to provide burden of proof in cases of in hearings on for special ed. And in the Senate last week, they had a hearing that was very long and where many people came with very intense, emotional stories about problems that they had had and why they thought that the Board of Education, rather than the parents, should be required to provide the burden of proof. And this is a pretty costly thing. Should it go through, it would probably bring up a lot more hearings, and it would put much greater demand on the Board of Education. I don't claim to be anything of an expert about any of this process, but my understanding is that this bill would be quite problematic for school systems. It's being heard tomorrow in Ways and Means, along with more than 12 other bills on education that MABE is taking positions on, plus some other bills. So you can see that the pathway of time sitting in hearings at this point is getting to be extensive. But there's an alternate to that burden of proof bill. House Bill 1161 would establish a commission on special education access and equity. And MABE does have a representative on that task, on that commission. And it's a pretty balanced group that's being suggested that would be continually looking at the issues relating to this. So where that will all go, we don't know whether the Senate committee will be voting that out, or it's like a, very close vote in the Senate Finance Committee on that. Excuse me, the Senate Education Committee. There's some new requirements on boards. One, the one that called for a searchable website, it's been heard by the Senate committee, but it hasn't moved. And it was heard a long time ago. And that sort of indicates that maybe it's going to sit in committee and never move. On the other hand, we have to keep watching it, because suddenly one day it could be on the floor and voted through. It hasn't gone to the House yet. The open meetings bill has been amended. This was one that would fine boards for willfully meeting in closed session, and the fines originally were suggested to be $1,000 for your first offense, and then much higher as they go up. Now it's $250 for the first offense, and this is for willfully meeting in closed session when you know you shouldn't. It's still I believe it's going to get through the House. May have gotten through the House last night, and then will be heard over on the Senate side. There's a bill in Senate Bill 775, which is teacher evaluation. It defers the requirements on some of the evaluation until some other systems are in place. It's MSEA is in favor of it. MCEA is in Maryland State Education Association is in favor of it. Maryland State Education Department is opposed to it. It's hopefully something that can get worked out without being subject to legislation. So there are some discussions going on. There are some proposals that you might be interested in that really don't directly impact you. One is social impact bonds. That's a phrase I'd never heard until recently. But the state board, MSDE, would be working with nonprofits who were bringing funds in to try projects that, if the project succeeded, it looks to me like if the project succeeded, they'd get paid more, they'd get paid back if there was success from these. But it's no cost to, it's not involving boards, local boards, and it's a relationship between the state board and these nonprofits. And also there's something called Race for the Tots, which is proposing some grant money for educational programs for the preschoolers, ECACs. I don't know what that is.
Testing for pre-K kids. No.
Okay, whatever. And again, this doesn't involve you, and, but it is more effort toward having stronger programs for preschoolers. And again, it, like everybody thinks that the slots money, the education trust fund, is just money that people can draw on, whereas it actually sort of just goes into the general fund. That's how that one would be funded. There's no BOST bill this year which would provide the tax incentive for people to give to parochial schools or non-public schools. But there is a modest increase in the funding for textbooks for non-public schools. So that's kind of maybe not this year, but next year. We'll do this year, but so this is the first year for a number of years there hasn't been a BOST bill. I listened last session when I was here to your discussions about spring break and so forth. There is a bill in to remove Easter Monday as a mandatory holiday. So that would give you some more play. I thought that was interesting that came up right after I had heard you all talking about it. There's another one that would require schools to start no sooner than the day after Labor Day. I don't think that one will move, but let's see, Ocean City people wanting to have both workers and visitors up through Labor Day. And then there's one that, again, I don't think is going to move, that sets the date for primary elections in gubernatorial in even numbered years. It's the first Tuesday in June, and I know that your staff had a lot of concerns about that. It gets involved with the dates for graduations and so forth. Relative to the budget, and I'm almost finished, the budget for education seems to be moving along. The subcommittee in the House didn't do damage to it yesterday, and the Senate subcommittee will look at it on Friday, and then it'll go to the full committees, and then eventually, if there are differences, to conference committee. There is finally one bill on budget issues by Senator Madaleno, Senate Bill 958, which would remove the 1% cap on foundation grants, which would be good. It says that GCEI must be funded, which has been optional up until now. And it sets a goal of $350 million per year in capital funds for school construction. So you can see that there are a lot of people with lots of ideas presenting them in Annapolis. There's always some surprises in the last few weeks, and so I may be calling you with some unexpected information. On the whole, it's a year where the education issues are less tenacious than they have been in several of the other years recently. So things seem to be moving along, and we will keep track of them. We hope that several of you are coming to the MABE legislative luncheon on Friday, and it should also give you a chance to visit with your legislators. Delegate Serafini is now on the Education Subcommittee in the House of Delegates, which is where Delegate Myers used to be. And so we're pleased that Washington County has representation on that committee that's very important to us. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Cade. Are there
If I haven't worn you out.
questions, or there's a lot going on in Annapolis? Are there questions or comments?
Just one short one. I know we need to move on, but on the College Readiness and Completion Act, I'm not sure I've seen a piece of legislation that's quite as scary as this one. Maybe, obviously, we don't know how it may turn out. Do Do you know if MSDE has weighed in on this, or Dr. Lowry, or the state board?
I'm not sure that the state board has, Maeve and Pazam both put in testimony at the last hearing, and we're going to have the Green Street group that's going to be working at the end of this week to develop what we think are potentially valuable amendments. And I believe MSDE, I haven't heard, I don't believe I heard any testimony from them, but they're involved with this discussion. So, yes, they are, if they haven't been, they will be, and I'll check on that specifically.
And I guess where I'm going with this is whether it would be helpful. There's a tendency when I look at this legislation to think that the people that crafted it don't really know or understand what we're already doing in college readiness and the park and what our different school board testing tells now as far as readiness for college level courses. And I'm wondering if it would be helpful to, and maybe Pazam's already done it, make a list of, by the way, we do this, check, we do this, by the way, we have dual enrollment with HCC and other higher ed, just to sort of give them a reality check.
I'll simply say this, Pazam is going to talk about this at our next meeting, but I think this is a much more calculated grab of funding from K-12
Absolutely.
than most people are admitting. And I think there's a coalition of higher ed that includes the community colleges that see this as a revenue stream for them. Yep. It's pure and simply a grab. It's not really about kids, because they clearly know that we have these partnerships, because these partnerships are two-way partnerships, right? I mean, you know, Dr. Altieri, for example, knows that we have 600 Essence kids on his campus. Dr. Altieri knows that we are talking about middle college. So those folks could stop this if they chose to, but they're choosing to go down a very different path.
Yeah, I would just point out under the bill, if you had a student enrolled both in our school system and a local college, the local college could not charge that student tuition, but the local board has to pay tuition to the college for that student based on some type of convoluted formula. So, so we'd draw money from the local boards and we go to the college level, and that's why when Art had commented the colleges really like this bill a great deal, it's because it has significant financial implications. I actually have a call in to Renee Spence, who is the legislative liaison for the state board, and to try to figure out how does this align with Common Core and everything else the state's is required to do under the federal law. And it just seems to be a misalignment from my perspective. So I did seek some guidance from that. We will continue to seek that guidance for you. We did provide you with a legislative analysis of this bill, and I was quite disappointed because, once again, it's cost to the local boards. They neglect covering it, just covering a sentence or two and say, yeah, there's probably some financial implications. It really results in significant additional revenue to the state if this bill passes in its present form.
It's very concerning.
It's very concerning.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Mrs. Cade?
Just real quickly, I want to thank you for shepherding me through the process down there, and I greatly appreciate that. It was very interesting, and as a matter of fact, I heard one bill that was rather interesting early on, but it was also very interesting to see how the committee diminished from every chair filled to 70% unfilled by the time I got, Ardith and I and Delegate Serafini got an opportunity to speak. So I can't imagine what it was like until 3 in the morning.
I can't either.
I did get a chance to read 200 pages of a novel, so it was okay.
He did an excellent job.
We really would.
Anybody else? I too want to thank you and really thank you for working with the delegation, especially on the disparity grant issues. I know the net tax that they've been involved as well, and your enthusiasm about the chances for the disparity grant bill make me more enthusiastic or more optimistic than I was when I walked in. So thank you for continuing to shepherd that through.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Art.
Next on the agenda is board member committee reports. Ms. Crable, student government.
Our next Washington County Association of Student Councils meeting is going to be a virtual meeting. So all of the exec board will be together at, I believe, North High, because that's where most of us are from. And we will be hosting a virtual meeting for students across the county. I'm assuming that you could attend that if you wanted to virtually. I do not know the details on how you could do that, but Mr. Ebersol would, if you would be interested in talking to him about that. But it would be a good opportunity for you guys to watch what we do. And it would be a shorter meeting because we don't have all the students there.
What's the date?
It is Friday, March 15th. It will be from approximately 9 to 10:30 in the morning. We are also planning our state convention, which is very exciting, and it's almost here. And we are revising the dress code after our meeting with the policy committee.
Thank you, Ms. Crable. Mrs. Harshman, curriculum?
The Curriculum and Instruction Committee met February 28th. We had an hour's discussion on the Gifted and Talented Education program, and we will be meeting again on March the 12th at 1 o'clock in the board conference room. Everyone is invited, and the agenda will be placed on the website.
Thank you, Mrs. Harshman. Mr. Bailey, finance?
Yes, we, as a finance committee, joined hands with the HR committee and met on February 28th. And of course, you passed one of our topics today. We talked about the insurance program and at some length, and made some recommendations that were carried through on today. We heard the financial reports through January 2013. We, as a finance committee, talked about the 403B employee plan and reviewed some grants that were being implemented within the system. And second quarter budget adjustments were reviewed and will come before the board, I believe, on the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mrs. Fisher, policy?
Policy Committee met on February 28th. The Maryland State Board had recently issued some new recommendations for the policies concerning concussions. We discussed those recommendations, which involve things like additional training for coaches and phys ed teachers, identifying some appropriate health care providers to deal with those students who incur concussions, increased notification, and so on. And we believe that there will be some things coming from that we'll have to build into our policy and regulations. We also reviewed 3 school safety policies and recommended a few minor changes in those. We also had a rather lively discussion with our student board member over the student dress code. We have actually charged them with going back to make some additional changes and to come before us again. And that next meeting is not on our regular schedule because of some other things that are occurring. It's set for March the 12th at 11 a.m.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Brightman, facility?
Facilities met on February 26th at the Frederick Street location. We received updates on the Bester construction. Footers went extremely well. I think we were all sort of holding our breath on that, and no surprises, which is always a good thing. We seem to be 2 to 3 weeks possibly ahead of schedule on the actual building itself. A couple dates that agenda committee may need to be looking at, and you may already be aware of, is the education facility master plan. The draft, I believe, is going out to FIAC maybe sometime in April. We're looking at maybe a May work session for that. QZAB money may be in jeopardy, and I know we voted tonight on a great project which had QZAB money in it, Fountaindale. Was that an HVAC project, or was that a roofing?
It was a boiler.
Boiler, okay. It looks like some of that money, at least 50% of it may be going away. Also, I understand that the county has not received the open space money for this fiscal year, much less next fiscal year, and I know we tend to count on open space to build larger gyms for community use, so we should be aware of that, and that may be a problem going forward. Also, we were approached, staff was approached by the county wanting us to weigh in on whether we could support the definition of a minor development being enlarged from 5 homes to 7 homes. And I think Mr. Criswell was going to do some research on that and get back with us, and that's something the board may want to come to some sort of consensus on and give the county at least our recommendation. I know that they were looking at the excise tax today, and I don't know if anyone knows the outcome of whether the county voted to waive the excise tax or not. And this would all be part of that APFO and funding for future construction projects. The next meeting normally would be March 26th, but we have 3 or 4 different things going on that day, and I think all the committees are trying to figure out how to reschedule March meetings, and stay tuned.
Thank you, Ms. Brightman. Mr. Ridenhour?
We met,
HR?
HR met with the Finance Committee to listen to the presentation of our financial staff, particularly dealing with health insurance. That was our last meeting.
Great. Mrs. Brightman, is there anything from the May Legislative Committee in addition to what
I think
Ardith
we've
has
sort of
covered?
gone through, I'd hate to do that to you at this point, but our next legislative meeting is March 25th, which I will be attending. I am unable to attend the legislative luncheon, so I encourage any and all of my colleagues to try to go down there. It's a wonderful time, and a lot of different legislators show up, not just our delegations, so it's a great opportunity to network. So I would encourage that, but I will report on the March 25th one.
Great. And Mrs. Harshman, Mrs. Williams, is there anything on the May agenda, conference planning committee?
Not at this time.
It was canceled, the last meeting.
You canceled they canceled the conference?
Canceled, no, the planning committee.
Okay.
Because of the luncheon, I believe, was moved to that day or something. So we haven't had a meeting since our last meeting here, so we'll let you know.
Great. Next on the agenda is future agenda items. Mr. Bailey already mentioned that we've added the second quarter budget adjustments to our next meeting. We've also scheduled a work session for the 26th of March that where the staff will report back to the board on the condition, on all the information they've learned and that our contractors have learned as they've looked through the Allegheny Energy building. So that'll be an opportunity for us to find out, get a better idea of what the true costs of that facility would be, and for the public to have the opportunity to hear it as well. Board member comments, Mr. Ridenhour?
Just one thing in particular. I mentioned it to her personally, but I also want to publicly commend our student representative for the efforts that she and her group, and this was something that I mentioned to the previous 2 student board members to really focus on, because it seemed to be something that students are obviously always concerned about, and that was the dress code. And we although the policy committee has sent it back and asked for some revisions, you know, to me, the bottom line is you put something on the table. And I'm very proud of your efforts. I'm also very proud when I listen to you speak to the media. I think you handle yourself in an incredibly professional and complimentary way for our board. So I'm very proud to have you there. I'm very proud of the efforts that you made.
Thank you, Mr. Admiral.
Mrs. Brightman?
No comments this afternoon, thank you.
Mrs. Fisher?
I'll get it right, February 27th, marked the first meeting of the Charter School Policy Review Committee, of which I'm a part. There have been some changes made to the state board's policy, which we need to incorporate into our local policy. We'll be meeting again on April the 10th.
Mr. Bailey?
Williamsport High School had a state champion wrestler at 106. His record was 32-1 for the season. A fine young man, academically sound, and a gentleman all the time.
Mrs. Williams?
I'd like to thank the board for the opportunity for me to attend the May boardmanship session that involved attending a meeting of the State Board of Education in Baltimore. The topics that day on the agenda were very relevant to our work, and I appreciate the board making it possible for me to participate in that boardmanship program and to attend that meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for trying to make yourself better, and because that makes us all better. It really makes us a better board.
Thank
so
you.
thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Harshman?
Nothing today.
Mrs. Crable?
I will not be able to attend the next board meeting. I will be on my way to Ocean City with 1,000 other kids from Maryland to host our state convention. So I will see everybody again in April.
Thank you. I just have a couple of comments. I was not able to be at board member comments last time because I wasn't feeling well, but I didn't want to fail to mention the exhibit at the Arts Council. I attended the opening of the exhibit of Washington County Educators' Art. So it's essentially our teachers' art on exhibit. So thanks to the Art Council for doing that. If you have a chance, go and see it. It's a real reminder that we have some incredibly talented people who are teaching our children. And I just encourage anybody who gets a chance to do it. You can see their beautiful new location down on South Potomac Street. I almost went to the wrong place. So, but it's a beautiful new facility for them, and there's some great art there as well. And I, too, want to add to what Mr. Ridenour said about the students presenting the dress code. I'll say to Ms. Crable that some advice somebody gave me once in public policy is it's always a marathon, not a sprint. But I will say to all of my colleagues, she's not afraid to mix it up with the board members, which was good. And I mean that in all seriousness. She did a great job in standing her ground, but knowing when to give a little bit when it looked like the votes weren't going to go her way. So I think you were very, very skilled, and I look forward to seeing what you all bring back and getting it to the full board.
Thank you.
This meeting will be rebroadcast on March 7th on Channel 99 at 6 p.m., as well as March 9th at 1 p.m. The public hearing is scheduled for March 12th, as I mentioned, on the budget, and I would just remind anybody who's interested in coming, it's scheduled for 6 p.m. We're not going to stay for 2 hours just to wait for people to come. We're glad to stay as long as there are people who have comments and have an opinion about our budget, but we'll start the meeting at 6. We'll take whatever comments and people might have, but once there's nobody else interested in speaking, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. So if your plan is to wait until 8 o'clock to come, we may not be here. You may have a dark auditorium. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that. If there's no further business, we will stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.